y'all, welcome to Pop Tea Gossip, where we cover the latest celebrity and entertainment news along with reality TV recaps. Today we're going to be covering the premiere of the season 16 Real Housewives of Atlanta, which I really enjoyed. I was excited for the season to premiere because I think it was over a year break. So it was so nice to see the girls come back in swinging, ready to go, and see some new fresh faces. I believe we have 3 new girls, and I love how they've kept some of the OGs to keep the originality of the show, but are introducing new Black women with wealth, and I mean, it just feels like it's Shamia's time. So this is something that's also exciting to see her expand her role on the show after being a friend of the show for many years. So to start off the recap, the season premieres with sound bites, with the most notable one that stood out to me was the soundbite from Shamia, where she says that Portia is her best friend and she's her biggest fan and she needs the same. I think it's important to remember this part because I think it's going to connect to the larger story between Portia and Shamia throughout the later half of the season, and just watching how this plays out between their friendship. Because if you're a fan of the show and you recall Shamia's friendship with Portia on the show, a lot of it has been captured as Shamia being a loyal friend who sort of dotes on Portia, and Portia just taking the friendship as it comes and being a little bit more careless. So I think it's important to note that comment from the soundbite where Shamia mentions that. So the season kicks off with Portia re-entering the group chat, joining the group of ladies again to be back for the season, and the producers mentioned that they've missed her, but the reality is, y'all, Portia don't want to come back to work. Portia is back at work because she has to, due to the divorce that she's facing and the money she's going to need to continue to live her lifestyle. So I think it's cool that she's been real about it. The fact that this is a form of work and marrying Simon was a way to, escape from this work, but she's had to come back and we've missed her. And so I think this will add to her having a good show. She starts off with talking about her divorce to Simon and just announcing that her and Pilar are still living in the marital home, and the overall trouble she's been going throughout the divorce, and just how it hasn't been that simple. She lets us know that they're early on in the marriage, they started having issues, trust issues overall, and that includes financial trust, like not being able to financially trust him because he kept a lot of things secret, like hiding the amount of money that he had in his bank account. The prenup is what forced him to have to come forward with that. So she mentions how there wasn't a lot of trust there once she started to look under the hood and they were locked in the marriage. Portia does mention the obvious by saying that some people would say that this is bad karma, but she claims that bad karma sometimes comes with good karma. And I'm just like, girl, be serious. She mentions, who the F did I marry? And obviously, girl, a man that you stole that you did not properly vet. And so here comes the crocodile tears. And I know a lot of people were looking for Portia to explain what happened here, since she quickly escaped from the show the minute she got married. And it was to avoid a lot of the press that would come around marrying someone that we did see you be introduced to on the show, but we later found out that she had already known Simon. So I think the producers did a great job having Portia start the episode off by giving us some context and answering those questions that people have had, been wondering about while she left the show. So next, we are welcomed to the Sterling Hall, the residence of Shamia Morton and her husband, Gerard. Shamia introduces us to her family. She has 2 daughters, Shiloh and Shia, and her mom, dad, siblings, nephews, and sisters. Her entire family was over, which is so nice to see because she is someone who seems to be family oriented. So it was really nice to see her family gathering together to launch her official premiere as a housewife on the show. So we learn about her husband. We learn that he is a manufacturer and he builds HVACs, and this is the air conditioning systems that are placed in airports. So he makes a pretty penny because her home is gorgeous. We do quickly learn, as Shamia is being introduced to us as a housewife, that she is long-winded, so she likes to talk a lot, which I find this funny. I think it just goes with her goofy personality. So it was interesting to learn that she actually talks a lot. So they did speed through some of her story time as she is telling us about her background and how she met her husband. But to summarize it, she shared that she met her husband Gerard at a nightclub, and she advises women to take a dump in his bathroom on the first visit because it could be a way to mark your territory. And so it's just a nice tie into her personality and just really shows you that they do seem to have a solid marriage where her husband loves her for who she is and she can be her wild, goofy self with him. And they've been married for, I believe, 10 years. So it was a really nice way to give us some background. I know she mentioned in the past that her husband isn't big on the cameras. So I'm wondering how much more we will see him throughout the season. So her segment does wrap up with it being very clear that Shamia is the connector. And I know a lot of people have been talking about how she's the glue of the season, and it is true. It is mapped out how she knows all of the women and her own personal relationships with them and how she's been able to meet them one-on-one or through Portia, which I believe the two people she met through Portia are the OGs, which is Cynthia. She mentions how she met Cynthia and Kenya, and just pretty much any of the original housewives. She met them through her relationship with Portia and being, a friend of the show. So as she, in the same vein, she's talking to her family about how she's going to be hosting events, and it just seems like her family is going to be a part of this experience since they're really close. And she plans on introducing her family to some new friends. And I think she just really talked about it and unpacked it in a way that maybe the producers snipped some parts. But this segment does conclude with her nephew sharing some words of wisdom by saying that if your friendships, have you thinking this hard, maybe you should rethink who your friends are, because friendships should be easy. I thought that was an interesting take because we know a little bit about the background with Portia and Shamia's friendship. So I do want to see what the larger picture is and what maybe has Shamia venting to her family and sort of trying to soften the blow about the friends that she is going to introduce to them. Another thing that I think is interesting is I won't be surprised if Portia does not like some of the shade that Shamia has thrown her way gently so far. One of them is that Shamia, they've been friends since they were kids, since 1996. And Shamia mentions that Portia was the one who told her that she should shave once she starts, being active with boys because they don't like hair. And something about that makes me wonder how Portia will take that, since the audience already views Portia as a thought. And not only do they view her that way, but at one point she was a self-proclaimed thought. So I do wonder how context like that will play out, because they do have the history of being friends. And technically Shamia, having a long history with Portia, knows where the bodies are buried. So it just really makes you wonder how Portia will take this on, especially having the reputation of, sleeping with the stripper on TV throughout her seasons of Real Housewives of Atlanta, and recently being, branded as a man stealer by going after Fallon's ex-husband. So I do wonder how she will take that, because it does make Shamia appear more into this innocent figure and Portia as the self-proclaimed thought she once claimed she was. So we go into Drew's storyline, and Kenya comes over. Oh my God, I am so happy to see Kenya. Drew is outside playing with her kids, and I think it's so funny that her daughter tackles her brother while they're playing catch football. And Kenya arrives with Brooklyn, and Brooklyn is so cute. So happy to see the both of them. It's really unbelievable that Kenya doesn't have any confessionals throughout this episode, but just so happy to see her. She comes in ready to bring the sauce, ready to get to work, and I really hope we get to see her next season or throughout this season more and officially back next season. So Kenya comes over, and another thing I want to say is I know a couple of YouTubers were rejoicing over the fact that Kenya was kicked off, especially people who are more of Nene's fans. They have this strong dislike for Kenya. So I noticed that a lot of people were happy when they noticed, the news spread that she was removed from this season and wouldn't have a center peach or a peach to join officially because of the situation with Britt. So it is very nice to see that it doesn't reign supreme. She is still sprinkled throughout the season. So I hope to see more of her. And I know that a lot of them do want Kenya to get the Nene treatment. So it's good to know that she hasn't burned her bridge so bad where she's not allowed to show face on the show at all. So Drew allows Kenya to come in. The girls go upstairs to play with the dolls. And they're catching up. And as they're making their way into the home, Drew shows Kenya Ralph's former den and his office. And in Kenya's words, after Drew shares with her that, Ralph is still at the home, but he has been banished to the basement, per Kenya's words, which I thought was very funny. So we do see a clip where Drew sent her daughter downstairs to check in with her dad, and it was pretty sad because it makes you wonder, why won't Ralph move out of the home and let the divorce play out? But that's a story for another day. I'm sure we'll learn more about it throughout the season. So we learned that Drew can't go to the basement without permission. She does need to contact Ralph first. And the legal system is involved since they are in the process of this divorce. So they have to use an app to communicate with each other. And Drew starts to share more about what that looks like and how, Ralph sometimes will use the app to spew his venom and, get a little bit hateful. And she just thinks it's great because the judge will be able to use that information to show what she's really going through and why she does need this divorce. So Drew and Kenya are catching up, and Kenya asks, what has Drew been up to? And Drew shares how she's doing her music. She's been in 5 different acting shows, so opportunities are still coming along, and she's still working, in other words. And she mentions that she was in Chicago or Detroit for something, and Kenya's like, well, I'm from Detroit. And then Drew's like, and Dennis is too. And Kenya's like, Dennis? And she's like, wait, which Dennis? So Drew starts to share her background with Dennis and how they're working together on her music projects. And Dennis is, I believe, an investor, which is crazy because we've never, he is a businessman who has many different ventures, but music was never one of them. We just always known Dennis as the hot dog man. So it does become a little bit questionable what their relationship is really like. And in my personal opinion, I allegedly believe that they're sleeping together, or they have a flirtatious situation going on. I can't put my hand on it, but I don't think it's as innocent as a business relationship. The one thing I do love about this is that Portia is acting unbothered about it, but I think it's a nice form of understanding, as Portia did we all know what she did to Fallon with Simon. So it's interesting to see it from this perspective, because I find that women like Portia who will do that somehow expect loyalty from everyone else, even if they don't give it to their most. Well, she did reduce Fallon to being an associate, but I find it interesting that she expects that loyalty but doesn't give it in return. Even if Fallon was her associate, she would still slide into the DMs of someone like him to snatch him up. So it is interesting to see her feathers a little bit ruffled between the relationship with Dennis and Drew. So Kenya asks Drew, why couldn't Dennis help Portia out with her single that came out in 2014? And Drew says maybe he wasn't into music like that, which that just makes it all the more interesting. So we learned that Drew claims that Portia does know about this relationship they have. She ran it by Portia, and Portia just said, yeah, girl, like, girl, yeah, whatever, sort of like brushed her off. And I just think that's Portia's way of acting unbothered. So we skipped into this segment where we meet Kelly. And Kelly's a single mother who's in the process of a divorce that has been ongoing for 2 years. She is from Baltimore and moved to Atlanta in the 2000s, where she started her food empire, and she's known as the queen of waffles, chicken and waffles to be exact. But they say the girl makes a mean waffle. So that is a bit of how she built her wealth. She's been in, the news. She has her own cookbook. She's also been featured in Forbes for her 24K gold syrup. So she has a few things going on for herself, which is really interesting. She seems mighty, but small. She stands at it looks like at about 4 feet in some inches, not sure exact, but she's fun sized. So she comes in swinging. She does introduce us to her family. She's having some type of tea gathering with her daughters, and it's her daughter's 17th birthday. So she gives her daughter 17 gifts, which were all really cool designer bags that her daughter loved. She does have 4 daughters, 3 with her husband that she's currently in the process of divorcing. And Kelly just comes in swinging. Kelly immediately states, where she stands in her opinion about Portia stealing a man. And so it's very clear in the beginning that she's not with that. Then we finally circle back to Portia, where we see her making her way to her attorney's office, and she gets stuck in the elevator. I'm sure a lot of you have saw that clip where she is stuck trying to get into the elevator, and she just has to it's just a little goofy segment that makes it just refreshing, because we saw her in 2013 entering the same attorney's office when she was divorcing Cordell. So the producers made this goofy way by having her trapped in the elevator, but really heading to take care of some very serious business. So she talks to her lawyer, where we see headlines produced from the Neighborhood Talk, and the Jasmine brand are featured to cover Simon's citizenship status, as well as his criminal past and just all the legal troubles he's been having throughout this time, which that does give a little bit more clarity as to why Portia wanted to immediately jump ship, because she did not want to be stuck, tied to someone who has all these legal battles going on. And this is where the prenup would kick in, where it would protect her from, all the legal issues that he has going on. So Portia admits that she would post online that her relationship was perfect and that they were so in love, but in reality, she knew that there was a lot going on that just wasn't right, which is why she had to exit the marriage the way that she did. So we go into the next scene where we finally meet Britt. Britt shows up to a dinner with Shamia and Kelly, and as they're waiting for Kelly to arrive, she is showing off her 10-carat ring to Shamia. Kelly arrives, and the girls order shots, and they start talking about Shamia's birthday party. And Shamia just mentions who she's going to invite: Drew, Portia, Ralph. And she mentions that she wasn't sure if she should invite Ralph because of everything that's going on. She's not 100% sure, but she does mention to the girls that they're aware that Portia is going through a divorce. And so she plans on having her there, and she just really feels bad for what Portia's going through. So Kelly doubles down again and mentions that Portia, shouldn't have taken that man from that girl. And, we all do agree. But Shamia immediately throws on her defending Portia's suit and becomes Portia's lawyer again. And so she says that, how does she know that? She doesn't really know Portia personally. And to some extent, doing what a good friend would do. And so one thing I would say to that is I do hope that Shamia treads carefully defending Portia this season, because she's no longer a friend of, and now she's a housewife. So part of that is mingling in these friendships where people will have different opinions about your best friend, and they may not like her. And obviously there's a limit where you're not going to allow them to trash talk her and take it so far in your presence, because it's still your friend. But I do think that it's important for her to not take this strong defending Portia's stance because we have seen in the past that Portia is not very big on honoring the friendship between her and Shamea. And so we all are side-eyeing Portia for this act that she did by taking that girl's man, whether they were in the process of divorcing or not. She slid in his DMs, and that is what she did do. So we all are side-eyeing Portia except for Shamea, apparently. So Britt heard that Drew could be dating Dennis because the topic does change over to, the history between Drew and Dennis and what's going on since they're being, seen out in the public a lot more. And Drew claims it's because of music. So Britt, hearing this, mentions that she knows a little something, something too. Shamea chimes in, and so does Kelly. Shamea starts by saying that, in Atlanta, she has heard that while they're out at the clubs, Drew and Dennis will sometimes, be found holding hands. And it just seems to be more of a business relationship. Like, it's not just business. It's more than that. And knowing Dennis, I'm not surprised that it could be more than that. He just can't help himself. So Kelly shares that a while ago, Dennis had slid in her DMs after she posted a photo wearing a bathing suit. And he just told her he couldn't believe she had kids because her body looked so good. And then Britt shares that she went on a date with Dennis back in the day. And she had been a vixen and in Black magazines since she was in high school. And on this date, Dennis bought her a diamond necklace. And so the women are curious, like, Britt, are you sure you didn't mess around with him? You didn't do anything for him, with him for that necklace? And she's like, nope. So Shamea was just like, oh, okay. Well, that means that you were definitely that girl back then. Like, that's just what that means. So it's really interesting to know that Candy was right. Dennis definitely has been around. The minute Candy found out that Portia was seeing Dennis, Portia didn't want to know nothing about him. But Candy was very adamant that she knows a lot of people and her people know the history of Dennis dating-wise, and he's been around. Like, not his first rodeo. He loves to give the good gifts, watches, jewelry, and she said that, Candy said she knew people who Dennis had pursued and courted and did the same thing by handing out flashy gifts, trying to secure the women by showing, his status of wealth by doing things like that. So, Shamea asked Kelly, is that where it stopped? And she's like, nope, I never replied to the DM, just left it there. So she also turns to Britt and she's like, that necklace you have on today, did Dennis get that for you? And she's like, no, Dennis could not afford this necklace. So interesting how she puts this cap on Dennis to kind of show that there are levels to this. So we finally get to see Portia and Shamea sit down together. They meet up at a strip club, which I loved this vibe. It was giving old school Atlanta when Phaedra and I think it was Cynthia who went down to the strip club. And I have been keeping an eye on Twitter conversations, and I noticed that a few people are mentioning that it's giving love and hip hop, but I don't think so at all. I think that strip clubs are a very big part in Atlanta. Even taking, a quick reference to the story time that Gorgeous Doll shared on TikTok with, featuring Future and all the nonsense they got going on and that whole thing, that's strip club lifestyle. A lot of these women in the strip clubs in Atlanta come across mega stars like, Drake talks about the Houston, Atlanta, Vegas experience with strip clubs. So I think it's a good tie-in. I think strip clubs are a part of Atlanta culture. So I think it's really cool that they meet up there. And it just gave this like old school vibe. So Shamea and Portia sit down. Portia arrives and she's like, my friend said come to the strip club. I'll feel all better. So say less, I'm coming. Now, I have to say, Shamea knows how to throw some shade, baby. Shamea throws some shade at Portia, and Portia says, she hasn't been outside, so her mouth hasn't been nowhere. And Shamea said, your mouth hasn't been where? Shamea says, that mouth has been somewhere. So Shamea shows Portia a text that she got from Simon, and Simon's just congratulating Shamea on joining the show. And Portia says, don't call him big bro. And once again, that blows my mind because Portia is so big on loyalty that she believes that she's worth, but in reality, she moves like a snake. She will always do what's in her best interest. So I think that's like, once again, it shows that one-sided play in the relationship where, Portia expects this treatment and all this loyalty, and Shamia's supposed to roll out the red carpet, but then she, gets to do what she feels like doing at the moment. And it's just very conditional to me. So this is one reason why I am a little bit more observant of their relationship, because it just seems one-sided. So to change the topic, Shamia starts defending Portia again by telling Portia what Kelly said about her, taking a man. And she also spills the tea about Drew hanging out with Dennis, and Portia is shocked. Portia is literally shocked, and I just think it's funny because, once again, Drew is doing to Portia what Portia has no problem doing to other women, which is sneaking around with their men. So we do hop in to Shamia's 42nd birthday party as she's planning for the event to happen that night, and it's raining, and Laura, we learned that Shamia can sing. Shamia's singing to God to make the rain go away, and her mom is there just encouraging her. And she just really wants the rain to stop because it will ruin her party, which a part of it is going to be held outside. So Shamia does have Kelly come over early so she can confront her about what she said about Portia, because Shamia said she wasn't comfortable, in hindsight, allowing her to talk about her friend Portia, and just really wanted her to know. So Kelly arrives, and Kelly's sort of like, girl, I know, I'm not surprised. Like, hello, it makes sense because, by that time, Portia had already started going on tour, letting us know that some girl named Kels was talking about her, and she was doing her Amazon Lives in her closet. And it was because Shamia was sharing this information with her while filming. So it makes sense why, Portia was ready to come for her, because she knew that Kelly was not afraid of mentioning what had happened, which was, to the public eye, it just looked like she did take Fallon's ex-husband, Simon. So she does sit down to talk to her about this, and Kelly just sort of says, I understand, but yeah. So we do see, as the ladies are getting ready to arrive to the party, Portia calls Cynthia, and Cynthia looks so good. Cynthia premieres on the show for the first time throughout this call, and she's checking in on Portia to see how she's doing throughout the divorce. And Cynthia just jokes like, damn, we can't go to Nigeria anymore. And here comes Portia claiming her 40% of being Nigerian. Child, Portia talking about she's 40% Nigerian and she holding on to it despite being divorced. So that's interesting and funny. And they talk about Drew, and Portia claims that even though she hasn't been there for Drew as much, someone has been there for Drew more than, they can count, and that's Dennis. So Cynthia's shocked to hear this information, and they just leave it at that. But it's pretty surprising to know that, for Portia, she claims that, she's done a lot to help Drew out, allowing her to be a brand ambassador for her hair company, and this is just how she feels like Drew repays her, by being sneaky and, running around with her man. But we get to see a glimpse of the party, and it's just looking so good as people start to arrive. There's a violinist there, it's all white, and her home is just so gorgeous. Cynthia says it's so exclusive that even on the invite, there is no address. It's just the Sterling Hall. So I just love that so much for Shamia. As guests start to arrive to the party, we get to meet Angela Oakley, who's one of the guests at the party and is a peach holder for this season. Angela is married to Charles Oakley, a basketball legend and all-star, former forward, I believe is the role that he played in the NBA. And she's just really proud of her husband. He is well known in the industry, and you can just tell that she very much loves him and really did a good job at introducing him, and just really showing that they're a power couple, and she's a alpha female, but lets us know that she can work him to get what she wants. He does seem like a no nonsense kind of man, since he is an older gentleman. So we meet them as they arrive to the party, and my first impression of Charles is he's very observant and mindful and pays attention to his wife. But one thing that did throw me off is how the camera did catch him mentioning that she had to put on a bunch of makeup and hair just to come out to this party. So I do want to see how it continues to play out, because it reminds me of the housewife husbands who show up for a season not too sure how this goes, and they end up being so blunt or so forthcoming, even if they're a quieter personality. So I do want to see how this plays out as we, get to see them more, because the side of caution that I'm airing is he more of a critique guy, or is he more helpful, which we do see later on in this episode that he could be more helpful with the critiques that he shares. So Cynthia arrives and she meets Kelly, and she just thinks that Kelly is so bold by coming out swinging with her opinion on Portia's taking Simon from Fallon. And remember that it's raining outside. So Drew shows up and says hi to the girls. And we learn that she has the same stylist as Angela, and Angela's freaking out a little bit because it's raining and, she has glue in her hair. So we do hear them, having a former connection by both of them being from Chicago. So that is easy to watch play out, because I think that she's going to be someone that will be helpful to keeping Drew connected to the group, because, now we know for sure that Portia doesn't like her, and neither does Shamia. And so I think this could be a good way to sort of keep her in the loop, because we know what happens if the prime girls don't like a girl. It could be hard for them. It could be really hard for them to film, as we're seeing this play out in Married to Medicine. So, as I mentioned the rain, we do see a side segment where Angela's husband is helping her out with her wig by mentioning that the glue was starting to lift, so she might want to go to the restroom to check it out and just to make sure that she's fine. So Kenya arrives to the party and immediately just lights up the place with her star power. The girls are really excited to see her. Kenya greets everyone except for Britt. She ignores her. And Kelly introduces herself to Kenya. And so you can see how Kenya is not as forthcoming with them. And she's ready to get to work with them. So she doesn't have the new girls. She just formally greets them by saying, "Nice to meet you," and doing her pageantry courtesy. And then Britt has to reintroduce herself again. And so from the back, I can tell that Kenya just does not care for Britt, which is a little bit funny because it's just giving that OG treatment of you're definitely have to earn your spot here. So Kenya starts to ruffle Britt's feathers by asking her about her ring and making jokes. And it just reminds me of that OG status that Kenya has. It definitely works because Britt runs to her man to share how Kenya was being nice, nasty to her. But at the end of the day, it's like, welcome to the Real Houses of Atlanta, baby. Like, it's not going to be easy coasting. Welcome. And Kenya did just that. So we do watch the party continue to progress. And Shamia gets a Rolls Royce Cullinan, a $430,000 car from her husband. And it is beautiful. It's just, wow. Wealth is in this episode, thanks to Shamia. So Cynthia says if she got presents like this, she would definitely have made her marriage work, which I thought was so interesting because we know how Peter definitely did rely on her a lot financially, and that just was so horrible to watch. Portia ends up showing up 2 hours late to the party while Shamia is accepting her gift from her husband, and she gently calls Portia out for being late and dismisses her to the left. Portia apologizes and then ends up offering Shamia help to get her dressed, and Portia claims that it was traffic that had her running late, but we all know that it's an excuse. At this point, we are expecting Portia to be this horrible friend that she has a history of being to Shamia. So as Portia is helping Shamia get dressed, Cynthia and Kenya sit down to talk about the girls and catch up, and Cynthia mentions Kelly's comment to Portia. And my girl Kenya says, hide your kids, hide your wife, hide your husband, because, we know what it is. Like, Portia has been branded as this girl who will do that. And so Britt is now hungry for Kenya's attention since, she's been starved of it from the beginning. And I think it just has to show you the star power that Kenya has. She's really hungry for this attention. So she pulls her to the side to have this segment, and it could have been produced for her to go talk to her about it since it was clearly bothering her. But they sit down to talk, and what makes me laugh is knowing that Britt wanted to have this conversation with her, Kenya played like she agreed, but in my heart of hearts, I'm like, Britt, you have no idea how this housewife game works because none of it went the way Britt planned. The minute they sit down, Ken starts to ask Kelly about what she said about Portia being, a man stealer and just sort of like getting her to, working her in true housewives fashion. So Britt is patiently waiting for her opportunity to come, and we all know Ken is never going to give it to her. So Portia arrives to the conversation, and all the girls are saying, greeting her. But then Drew says, it's really loud. We should go upstairs to an area that's more quiet so we can talk. And so the girls go upstairs using the elevator, and we just continue to be so amazed by the wealth that Shamia has. Her home is so beautiful. And so the girls sit down to talk, and Shamia asks Drew why didn't she invite her to her birthday party. And Drew claims that no one was invited to her birthday party. And Portia says, well, Dennis was. And so in typical Drew fashion, she starts to lie about how her assistant was supposed to invite the girls but didn't invite anyone. And she says to Portia, well, you didn't come. And Portia says, well, Dennis invited me. You didn't really invite me. It was Dennis who invited me. So like, why would I come, girl? So the season premiere episode does end with the start of this conversation where they are going to dig a little bit deeper into the dynamics, and I just cannot wait for it. I am really excited to review the season 16 because we have been waiting for this season to come, and it is here, and the girls are ready to get to work. So definitely subscribe, like, comment your thoughts in the comment section to let me know what you're thinking about what this season will look like. I think, so many takes that we can take from this, especially having the OGs around still. So let me know in the comments your thoughts and stay tuned for the next video.